What's up guys, Hunter Konechny here. Today we're talking jigs. So the jig is one of those legendary baits that's really been around since the dawn of bass fishing. I mean, people have been catching them since bass fishing first kind of started, and I imagine 100 years from now they'll still be catching them on a jig. It's just one of those baits that flat works, and it's something you should definitely be throwing, and there's ways that you can catch more fish on them, which I'm going to kind of go over today and really cover everything about it. So today's going to be really a full tutorial. So I'm going to start out by telling you everything you need to know, what baits you need to throw, things like that. And then I'm going to actually show you how I throw a jig and give you some on the water kind of tutorial type information and as we get towards the end of the video. So stick along for that. That's going to be very helpful as well. But to get into it, let's first start where to throw a jig and the most effective areas of where you might target and different things to look for, things like that. So with the jig, really what you're trying to do is, like I said, you're going to be imitating a crawdad. So crawdads are going to tend to live more in rocky type structures. So targeting rock oftentimes is going to be the best area for throwing jigs. This can be anything from, if you take your topographic map, go and look at the points on the lake, so throwing it to points. If there's like breaks for the river channels, things like that, that can be very effective. Just steep rocky banks, like if you're looking at that bank and it's just kind of that 45-degree like slope out into the shore where it gets deep fairly quick, got big chunk rock, things like that, that's another great area to throw it. So your humps, rock piles, things like that. Fish structures can be another great area to do it. But all that in mind, really the key behind a lot of this is throwing it around rock. So if you're around rock, a lot of times you're in the areas where a jig has potential to work pretty good for you. So find those rocky areas, throw that jig out there if you're unsure of what the bottom composition is, and just see if you feel rock. If you feel rock, you know you're kind of in the right spot there. If you're just kind of dragging it along, you're not really feeling much, you're probably dragging more of on like a sandy bottom. That's probably not where you want to be. So first key with that is find rock, fish those points, secondary points, rock piles, rocky banks, just anything with rock is going to be a great place to throw a jig. So keep that in mind to start. This is a technique that works all times of the year. So you can be throwing this in the middle of the summer, you could be throwing this in the winter, kind of like what we got going today. And the jig is known really as being a big fish bait too. So you can get good numbers throwing it, and you can also catch big fish. There's plenty of the biggest fish in the lake that will be caught throughout the year in any given year on someone throwing a jig. So don't be scared to throw this to target bigger fish, but also it can catch numbers too. So it's kind of a really good all-around bait where you kind of got the best of both worlds. It has the tendency to get some of the bigger bites in the area you might be fishing, but you also get a lot of bites. So keep that in mind. So, and then like I said, this is a bait that works 365 days of the year. So there isn't a day that you go on the water where a jig isn't a technique that has a pretty good shot at catching fish. And that's really why I wanted to kind of get into this, is I feel like I haven't been getting out some of these educational type videos as often as possible. And I want to do this with techniques where I feel like you guys have the most success and chance of really doing well on the water with. So couldn't really start that without mentioning the jig, and that's why we're starting here. But let's get into the specific baits now. So with jigs, there's many different sizes of them. You have super big jigs, you have finesse jigs, there's jigs that are kind of in the middle. And I want to just break that down for you, give you some tips to really kind of know when to throw what kind of jig and steer you in the right direction there. So let's start out on the small end of the spectrum first, and then we'll work our way up. So the finesse jig, you can kind of see here, this is really like the full size type jig, and depending on what trailer you put on, that's really going to ultimately dictate what the overall profile is. But you've got a finesse jig, and then you've got your big old football jig right here. And really where the finesse jig is going to shine, so to start out, the finesse jig is going to be more of that like 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce size jig. The skirt's going to be much smaller overall. The hook size is going to be much smaller, and it's going to be designed to house a smaller trailer. So really the key behind the finesse jig is everything is just more compact and smaller. The hook wire is smaller, you're going to throw this on a little bit lighter gear. Where this is going to shine, I really like finesse jigs anywhere they're smallmouth. It just seems like they really like eating those finesse jigs. Anytime I've fished around smallmouth, you'll catch a lot of fish that way. You'll catch some of the bigger ones. Like, it just works really good. If you're at a lake that tends to have a lot of smaller fish, so for our Arizona guys, Bartlett is a perfect example of there just isn't really many fish over 3 pounds in that lake. So downsizing your jig and throwing a finesse jig is a great way to get some of those bigger bites, but not making it too big where a vast majority of the fish population won't bite it anymore, because that starts to be the issue if you start to throw too big of a jig at Bartlett, for example. So basically smallmouth, areas with smaller fish, and then the last scenario is when we're fishing these winter months, bites really start to become a premium, and it's hard to just get them in general. The fishing's tough. You're not going to go catch 20-30 fish a day like you might have been or other times of the year. Those winter months can be really tough. Downsizing your bait to a finesse jig is a great way to get more bait or more bites that time of year. So I definitely recommend giving that a shot and keeping that in mind. And a lot of times you'll catch more fish doing that. And then just in general, finesse jigs you're probably going to get more bites on throughout the entire year. So you might not get as big of bites, but if you're just the guy that's looking to really kind of hone the craft, have a good time on the water, catch a lot of fish, then it's not a bad idea to start with this, and then you can always upsize if they're really eating it. But the specific jigs I like throwing, so this one right here is a Kitech. It's just a Kitech finesse jig. I don't exactly know the specific name of it. I like throwing this in 3/8 ounce. I believe they make a 1/2 ounce in it too, so either 1/2 ounce or 3/8 ounce is what I'm going to throw the majority of the time. If I'm fishing a little bit shallower, I'll throw the 3/8. If I'm fishing 15 feet or deeper, I'll throw the 1/2 ounce, and that tends to work pretty good for me. Another good option for a finesse jig, I don't have this one opened for you, but it's a Picasso. It is the it's the little spot jig. So I've caught a lot of fish on that jig. That's one that's really worked good for me. Both of these jigs I'm recommending you here are a little bit more expensive. They are tungsten. They both have Gamakatsu hooks, so they have good hooks in them, and they just work good. So fortunately, these are a little bit more expensive. I think they're probably $8 each, but I'm recommending you guys the ones I actually use, and I've caught a lot of fish on these. So as far as the trailers, so the trailers that I use on pretty much all the jigs, you can apply it to any one of them, and it's going to work fine for you. But with the finesse jig, you're going to use the smaller version of whatever bait name that there might be out there. So this one right here, that matches up pretty dang perfect to this Kitech right here, and it would match up to that Picasso as well. But this is the Fat Pack Beastie Bug. This is just a great overall trailer. It's got a fair amount of kick to it, good action. But like I said, it's just about the perfect size for this, so that works really good. Another one that is really just a staple, it's been around since forever, is just a Yamamoto double tail grub. So they have these from 2.5 inch, which is like perfect for throwing on that finesse jig. They've got a 4-inch version, they got a 5-inch version. So just depending on what profile and how big of a profile you're wanting to throw, that Yamamoto double-tailed grub is a great option for that. That's one I've been throwing for many years, and it just works. So whether it's cold, warm, anything in between, it just works well for that. And then another option I like throwing is just kind of a beaver style bait as a trailer. So right here I have the Missile D-Bomb. So this is the baby D-Bomb, and then they actually make a micro D-Bomb as well. So for those finesse jigs, that micro D-Bomb might be just the sweet spot you're looking for. Kind of the middle ground jigs, this baby D-Bomb's great, and then for the super big jigs, throwing the full-size D-Bomb is another great option. Another one I use is Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver. So any one of those is really going to work fine for you, and it's just going to depend on what kind of mood your fish are in. So if they want just kind of a dead action bait, then something like this beaver style bait's going to work good. If it's kind of just middle ground, just versatile, cover a lot of different bases type jig, that double tail grub is a good option. And then as a little bit more aggressive option, that Beastie Bug has a lot of kick to it, so that works really good as well. It's gonna, every time you pick that thing up, it's gonna kind of kick and flutter, and that works good. So I really think around the smallmouth, this is gonna be a killer for that. So definitely keep that in mind. So the next thing is gonna be kind of your middle ground jig, and really what this is gonna entail is your trailer size is gonna kind of make this more. So some of the jigs that you're gonna make your biggest size jig can also be the medium size, just depending on what trailer you put on there. So same trailers are gonna apply here. Beaver style D-bombs, like the 4-inch Yamamoto grub is gonna work great for this. And then that bigger Beastie Bug works great as well as kind of that middle ground jig. And this style jig, I'm gonna throw more in like a 1/2 ounce, and it's gonna be just kind of a medium profile. So a 1/2 ounce football jig. Once you bump up into size, the options start to become a lot more prevalent, and you can really throw a lot of different jigs. They're all gonna pretty much work good. And those finesse jigs, there just isn't a lot of options there. So the ones I gave you are definitely the ones that I'd recommend. But for these middle-sized jigs and the big jigs, find something that's got a good hook on it. So a couple of them that I've been using for years now. So the Strike King has a Gamakatsu hook in it, just the Strike King football jig. That's a good option there. Dirty Jigs, once again, great hook in it. A lot of different options there. So that's another one I've been throwing over the years and working very well for me. So just find a jig that you like. I tend to throw football jigs for the most part, and that's going to get you in the right direction there. And then any one of these trailers I mentioned, that's going to work fine for you, and it's going to put fish in the boat. So one last little tip before we get into the biggest size jig is you can cut the skirt down as well. So I mean, you can see this is a pretty big profile here. You can trim that thing down just a little bit and just kind of shrink the size of it, and that'll shrink down the overall profile of that as well. So that middle ground jig is really one that you're gonna catch a lot of fish on. I'd say it's probably the most universal. It'll fit the most situations. So for the guy that's just grabbing a jig and you just want one that's gonna work in just about any situation, that's where I would recommend starting. So like I said, get something like the Strike King, Dirty Jig, something along those. Just make sure it's got a good hook in it. I've always liked throwing jigs with Gamakatsu hooks in it, and you're probably going to be pretty well set off. Pair it with one of those trailers and you're good to go. So the last style jig, so I'm not going to pull this off, but basically how I would make this bigger is if you throw something like the full-size D-bomb on there, now you have a big old giant profile, really displaces a lot of water. And I'm gonna throw these in situations where I'm either A, trying to target the biggest fish in the area, or B, once you kind of roll into those summer months, the fish just tend to be more aggressive in general, and you can get away with throwing bigger baits. So if I'm fishing around a lot of big fish, or if we start to get in the more warm summer months, that's when the biggest jig's gonna shine. And the reason why I throw it in the summer too is just fish are aggressive in general. So although I might be trying to target bigger fish, a lot of times the smaller ones will still bite it when they're aggressive like that. So next thing I wanted to get into was color. So it's pretty simple when it comes to jigs. I pretty much either throw some kind of green pumpkin. So this one's green pumpkin, has a little bit of brown in it. Peanut butter and jelly is another great option. I've caught a lot of fish on both of those. And then like a watermelon. So if you're fishing a little bit more clear water, that's when I tend to pick up the watermelon. But that's pretty much as far as you have to get. If you're fishing like muddy water, then a black and blue is another option. So clear water, watermelon, middle ground, green pumpkin, mud water, black and blue. That's pretty much all you need to know, and doesn't get much simpler than that when it comes to jigs. So as long as you're some kind of natural color, they're gonna bite it. As far as equipment, we'll get into that next. So when I'm throwing a jig, if I'm throwing more of that finesse style jig, I'd say anywhere from like 1/4 to 1/2 ounce. Oftentimes throwing that on a downsized reel, I'm gonna throw this on a bait caster pretty much exclusively, but throwing it on a downsized reel like the Corrado 70, for example, Daiwa makes another version that's very similar, just that kind of honed down reel that's still made to be powerful. It's not a BFS reel, but smaller in size, smaller spool, things like that. That's going to work great for the finesse jigs. It's going to give you plenty of power for setting the hooks. You're going to be able to cast them a mile. It's just going to work good. For finesse jigs, I'm going to throw that on like a medium fast action rod. If I'm throwing more of the 1/2 ounce ones, I'm going to throw it on a medium heavy fast action rod, and that's going to work great for it. For the medium sized jigs, like your 1/2 ounce, I'm going to throw those on pretty much the same rod that I would throw my heavy jigs on as well. So fast action heavy rod is going to work great for this. Anywhere in that like 7 foot to like 7'4" range is perfect. So fast action, heavy, 7 foot, 7'4", that's going to work great for that. With the finesse jigs, I throw it on a little bit lighter line, so 8 to 12 is going to work great for that. For the medium and full size jigs, it's just going to depend on how clear the water is. So if it's super clear, throw it on 12 pound. If it's super dirty, you can throw it on 20 pound. Doesn't really matter, just match that water clarity to the line size and cover your fish in. You're going to be good to go there. Covered the rod for the big jigs, but that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Like I said, you're going to catch a lot of fish on that. So now let's get into the actual on the water tutorial. I'll show you how I throw them and the specifics behind the techniques. All right guys, so this is how you actually fish a jig. So I'm out here on Saguaro today. You're going to take that jig. So right now I have a 3/4 ounce that's got a Yamamoto double tail grub on it. Just a good overall way to catch a lot of fish on a jig. So I'm gonna bomb that thing out onto the point I'm fishing. So let that thing hit the water. I'm gonna give it a little bit of slack, and I'm just gonna watch my line until I see that get on the bottom. So now that I see that it's not sinking anymore, I'm just gonna engage that reel. I'm gonna put a little bit of tension on it and kind of start pulling that slack out. So once you pull that slack out, you don't want to be moving this thing too fast for the most part. So you're going to just be kind of pulling it along, and I'm really trying to like count the rocks on the bottom. So I'm just going to move that rod tip real slow. You always want to do all the movement with the bait with the rod rather than the reel. That just makes it where you're a lot more in tune with it. It's a lot more sensitive that way, and you're letting the rod kind of transmit the feeling for you down there. If you do it with the reel, you just don't have the same feeling. So you're just going to kind of slowly pull, move it along. So as you can see, I'm moving this pretty slow here. This is winter time when I'm fishing this. So in the summer, you can get a little bit more aggressive with it. But when we're fishing in the winter, you really just want to move that thing along super slow. You're just trying to really dissect that bottom, count all the rocks. You have to remember, for the most part, when a crawdad's moving along on the bottom, that thing isn't moving 3 miles an hour back towards the boat at you. Like, that thing is just gonna hop, sit there for a minute. He might graze over this next rock, and then it's gonna just be a slow, methodical process. So you have to remember, when you're fishing a jig, that's really what you're imitating, and you wanna move it like a real crawdad would be moving on the bottom. So you're just gonna move that super slow and just kind of drag that thing back towards you. Always wanna be fishing around rocks if possible when you're throwing a jig. You can catch them without rocks, but for the most part, the rocks is really gonna kind of help you. That's where the majority of the crawdads are gonna tend to live. But I'm gonna bomb that thing back up there again. Let it hit the water, feed it a little slack, and just wait for it to get to the bottom there. So it's still stinking, still sinking. Still sinking, feed it a little bit more line. Okay, now we're on the bottom, so I'm gonna engage that reel, and I'm just gonna put tension on again. So you're just gonna slowly pull that. So the way that the bite's gonna happen when you're throwing a jig, the majority of the time, as long as you're got steady tension on it and you're just kind of feeling it and keeping things moving along, what's going to happen is you're going to feel that kind of stereotypical just thump. So just the standard bottom jig bite. If that happens, you're going to just lean into them and set the hook. So you want to make sure you have enough slack when you do that. Like, if you're already at the end of the pole here, you can't really get a good hook set. So you might have to reel some slack in, set the hook, stick that fish, get him in the boat. The other option is, for whatever reason, maybe you didn't have full feeling of it and you didn't feel the bite. The other thing that can happen is you're just kind of pulling along, and then all of a sudden your bait just feels heavy. So it's kind of got that like wet sock feel to it. Like, you're just kind of down there dragging something. So usually when that happens, it means the fish has it in his mouth and you just didn't feel it. So if that happens and you just feel that wet sock feeling, just kind of keep putting tension on it, keep pulling it, and lean into it a little bit harder and faster. If it feels like it's loading up and it's not releasing, like you're not stuck on a rock, then you want to set the hook on that bait, or on that, because more than likely the fish has it in his mouth and you just didn't feel it. So jig's pretty easy to fish. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but that's how I tend to fish it. If you're fishing in the summer, you can get a little bit more aggressive with it and kind of hop it and do different things like that. Like for example, let this thing sink to the bottom here. The warmer it gets, the more aggressive you can get, but when it's cold like it is right now, the real emphasis is being slow with it. And just in general, just dragging the jig on the bottom is a good way to fish it. But if you're fishing a little bit more warm months, you can give it some hops and do different things like that, like just a little 1-2. Just kind of what that does is so when a crawdad takes off, it does two things. It shoots up and then it takes off. So if you do a little like double hop, that kind of emulates that, and it can make the fish react. Because what it looks like is the crawdad saw the bass that's looking at it, it shot up and it's about to take off. So when you do that little 2-hop, that can trigger the bass to bite time to time. So that's something that I mix in a little bit more as it gets warmer, but when we're cold like it is right now, it's always slow. But other than that, the jig's pretty easy to fish. Big fish catcher, catches a lot of fish. So make sure you guys give it a try. Have any questions, let me know. So I hope you guys found this video helpful. I really want to integrate a lot more on the water tutorials like this, because I think it's very helpful to you guys. It's a lot easier to see how I'm actually doing it rather than me describe it and then you guys kind of have to interpret it and go from there. So drop a comment down below if you find this helpful, and I'll continue to do these. I want to try and mix these in a lot more often. But other than that, I'm doing a real giveaway at 2,000 subscribers. Make sure and hit that subscribe button so you're eligible. We're getting pretty dang close, so I think we're going to be giving that away sooner than later. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so I'll catch you on the next one.